an original.
From Story Studio Network.
All right, here we go. It's Now and Next, flagship podcast for Story Studio Network. Dave Trafford here, and it's our bi-weekly gathering of our comms crew. I'm leaning towards using the phrase eye contact somehow, because we all sit in rooms, talk to ourselves, but have to make eye contact with people we don't see. So, and that is the challenge of the good comms veterans and experience and experts that we have in the room. Lindsay Broadhead is here, along with Anne-Marie Aikins. Bob Reid is here. Brad Ross is here. And hope you all managed to have a half-decent holiday weekend. It was kind of, I don't know about you, Brad, but when it falls on a Monday, I feel like I'm cheated out of something. I would rather have it, I don't know, in the middle of the week so it breaks things up nicely.
Well, I used to hate it when it was on a Tuesday. So you have to come into work on the Monday after a weekend. Then you get Tuesday off. Then you're back Wednesday. So, everybody also took the Monday as a vacation day. So Mondays, for those who didn't take those days, were kind of sat around the office wondering what to do with yourself. So
yeah. Well, and that's what happens with the Americans, right? Because their 4th of July is the Thursday, and the Fridays becomes a sort of a lost day. Although same thing with their Thanksgiving. Although it drives me a little bit crazy when people say, "Well, why don't we always just have Canada Day on the first Monday of?" Well, no, that's not how it works. I feel like moving Christmas, right?
Or your birthday.
Well, yeah, kind of. That's the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, lots to talk about, and in no apparent order, but I think top of mind, it's just one of those things that everybody was tuned into. You didn't have to be a follower of U.S. politics, but the way it was all being certainly hyped and presented and promoted, the big debate between Biden and Trump. Here we are about a week out from all of it, and the first reactions were incendiary, Lindsay, in terms of Joe Biden's performance and whether or not, Donald Trump is just more of a liar than he was before he stepped up to that podium. A week out, where are you on what the fallout of all this? Because I think we're still weeks away from seeing the real results.
I think you're absolutely right. It was a shocking debate, but then shocking in its unshockingness, if that makes sense. Like, I think we saw something unfold that was inevitable. We've been seeing the signs of it. Trump lying, there's nothing surprising about that whatsoever. We're just seeing it embodied and play out again and again. And there was something incredibly sad for me anyway. I don't know how you all feel, but watching, an older, brilliant politician get old, and we knew this was happening. So there's kind of a frustration and sadness and inevitability, as I said, all these things wrapped together because we knew it was coming. For me, I guess a few things stand out. One is how thankful I am, it being Canada Day, to dwell on the fact that we're in a multi-party system. The two-party system scares me to death. But it does point to Canadian politics really quickly, because it feels like we're in a two-party system a little bit in Canada, where we've lost our middle. We've lost, I'll call it the liberal middle, but we've lost the red blues and the blue reds and all of that discussion. None of it exists. There's a gap. So we've done this to ourselves. We're in a Trump-Biden mix ourselves with very different characters because we're not allowing for gray discussions. It's black and white always. So that's a rant to the Canadian side that I'm sure we'll pick up on the threads throughout this. But from a Biden point of view, I think it's inevitable that he has to step down and someone fill that spot.
Bob, when we watch this, and you're in the business of, reputation and reputational recovery and that kind of thing. This to me was screaming from the rooftops last Thanksgiving in the United States when the Bidens all sat around to have turkey and decided that Joe Biden was going to run again. And all I could think of is at that time, who was the adult in the room who could not see the reputational damage that was likely to happen here? And that was back in November of last year. Here we are now where Joe Biden could have been remembered as the guy who held Donald Trump to being a one-term president. He defeated Trump and saved the Americans from Trump. Now he's likely to be remembered and ridiculed as the guy who is a one-term president who gave Trump his second term.
Bang on. And they're excellent questions, but they're really, really difficult discussions to have. Especially when you're dealing with the president of the United States, who is the incumbent, who has a God-given right to run for that second term. It's a pretty hard discussion to have, and a hard argument to successfully make. I'd be curious to know if anybody tried to have it previously, but now this debate has forced this into a front burner issue, and it's not going away. And the image of Joe Biden, especially on television, it was that much stronger if you watched it on TV because it was the split screen and both were on camera the whole time. The visual of him looking like the proverbial deer in the headlights was indelible. And let's remember, we've been hearing since the outset that this campaign is going to come down to a small number of voters in some key districts in a couple of key states. The vast majority are already dug in. The Trump supporters are not going anywhere. The Biden supporters, whether they are Biden supporters or anti-Trumpers, are equally hard locked in. So that debate was the chance for that swing vote to make the assessment. Which one of these two looks like he should be captaining the ship for the next 4 years? And that's where Biden failed miserably. Trump looked sharp. He looked on his game. Whether everything he says is bullshit or not, and I know 90+% of it was, he sold it. He came off looking like somebody who was vibrant, who knew where he was going, who knew what he was allegedly talking about, and what his game plan was, and there was none of that from Biden. So now they're trying to do the damage control on that. He's doing a major network TV interview this week. There's a full presidential news conference scheduled for next week. We're going to be seeing a lot of Biden. They're going to be trying to show him as vibrant and in command, but it is a tough road to hoe.
Yeah, I think, Anne-Marie, when I was listening to this, and this, again, a week out from it, the initial hair on fire response, I think, was predictable because, my wife and I are watching this and, Anne's looking at her phone, doing other things, and all of a sudden Joe Biden starts to talk and she just turned her head and said, what the fuck? I mean, right, that was that. And here's somebody who's just kind of on the sidelines, half observing, and boom, that is the lasting impression. You're not going to be able to change that impression to Bob's point very easily, if at all. But here's what I think is interesting. The Democrats are falling all over themselves and creating problems because they are self-aware and willing to say out loud, our guy shouldn't be our guy. Where the Republicans are falling all over themselves no matter what Trump says, our guy is our guy. Even as the liar he may be, even as the chaos character that he may be, it's just such two stark views, back to Lindsay's point, of what these two parties are and how damaging they are to themselves.
Yeah. I think to what Lindsay said, it all made me very, very sad because I think a couple of things is, did Biden do well? No, not at all. He didn't do well. But it's a factor of getting older that you're not as sharp, you're not as quick with the jokes and so forth. And what it's all become is you're too old and you have to step down. And that really just really bothers me because I think it's the only ism we have left in the whole of all the isms that people are not afraid to say out loud, no matter what. You're just too old. And I think it's too late to have. How can this? We have 4 months till the election to have somebody else step in. I don't know. So it all makes me very sad, and it makes me very sad that, and it happens here in Canada too. We don't focus on people that lie. We have in Trump, there's a convicted felon. All of those things that you would think the public would want to focus on, the very negative things about people, and that Trump makes it so easy to. We aren't even talking about that because we're talking about a guy that's, in most people's opinion, just too old to do the job. And I just don't think there is enough time for him to have someone step in, even the vice president.
Well, Brad, I mean, everybody say, is he up to it for the next 4 years? I question whether or not he's up to it for the next 4 months to get, adequately to something that shows a good showing on Election Day.
This was the biggest stage of all stages. This was his opportunity to persuade, to influence, to be the communicator in chief, not just the commander in chief. And as everybody has said here, it was very sad to watch. And it was a bit shocking, frankly. I mean, it was like, just the moment he walked out onto the stage, we saw, and you're right, Anne-Marie. I mean, we got to be very careful around ageism, but we saw him very stiffly walking out. And from that moment, this was a tour bus crash of all bus crashes. And that's what happened here with Joe Biden. And I don't think there's any recovering from this. I know, Barack Obama said, I had a bad debate night and the like, and, we all have bad nights. This was the biggest stage, and his opportunity now, and I don't know enough about the DNC and how they operate and whether or not they can quickly find another candidate, but he risks becoming, the Ruth Bader Ginsburg of the presidency and not stepping down soon enough to prevent a Donald Trump second term. And Ginsburg, as we know, didn't step down soon enough, and what ended up happening is a court that is completely ideological now.
Well, I mean, who would have thought, Bob, that Joe Biden was going to be the disruptor in this election? I mean, even court decisions aside this week, I mean, Biden has become the chaos character.
Yeah, he was supposed to be the steady, trusted hand on the tiller. And I think by and large, succeeded in that in the first term. But yeah, the questions are looming too large now, and I'm with Brad. I don't think this is recoverable. And to Anne-Marie's point, yeah, I agree. Ageism is a terrible thing, but if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it is what it is. And that's what I think so many Americans are realizing here is that, wait a minute, this is just not tenable. This just doesn't, I don't know if I can sleep at night with somebody that precarious in the highest office.
I was listening to Bob McCallum's podcast this week, and this is not a tangent, I promise, Lindsay, but they had Nelson Millman on, and Nelson used to be the program director at the Fan 590 here in Toronto, and he was heavily involved in Sportsnet, et cetera. And they were talking about the future of media, and Nelson brought up a point. He said, I can sit here and look at it, but it's just not my turn anymore. And we all kind of have to come to that realization at some point. And that's what I kind of go back to that Thanksgiving dinner. At some point, somebody in the room had to have told him, implicitly, when he was elected in 2020, the expectation was Joe Biden was only going to be a one-term president. After that, it wasn't his turn anymore.
Yeah, and Bob mentioned the word incumbent, and again, like bridging back to Canadian politics, that's a word that's we're wrestling with here, federally, provincially, et cetera. But from a leader point of view, and we keep talking about leaders, kind of episode to episode here. But what is a leader's real job, right? They don't own the seat. The seat is borrowed temporarily, and there's a legacy to the seat, and the seat needs to be handed off well. And when you own the seat in that way, when you own a leadership position rather than fill it, and I think this is exactly what you're saying, it you're making decisions based on all the wrong things. It's not what's best for the country. It's not what's best for the party. It's what's best for that individual, or that kind of community of individuals. So I totally agree with you. They cracked open that second bottle of wine at that Thanksgiving dinner and kind of forgot their logic somewhere as they splashed it forward.
Well, when they first debated in 2020, Anne-Marie Danabash came back off the back end of it, just called it, that was a shit show. If you'll recall, that was her comment coming out of it. She was at the desk for this one. And just generally speaking, I think that format in and of itself was a disaster. And it always is. I don't ever think you find the right mix in debates. And we can debate whether or not debates are useful or not. But that there was no opportunity or effort or room to call out the bullshit on either side. This really worked against Biden to begin with. And his team agreed to all this.
Well, I think to focus on his team really did him a disservice. He would have been criticized because, I think, again, he's a Democrat. They wanted to do the right thing by, yes, let's debate. But this format would just set it up for a perfect Donald Trump kind of, I get 2 minutes just to bullshit my way through it and just do that over and over and over again. And as much as they tried a couple of times, a feeble attempt to get him to actually answer a question, he successfully just kept repeating his same talking lines. So they should. The people around him know exactly the situation he was in. If they said he had a cold, then that would have been their out. Like, I think they didn't do him they did him a disservice by not protecting him from that. If you're bound and determined to have him run, then don't put him in a situation where he was bound to fail.
Well, when did that happen, though? I mean, really, that could have been Easter. It could have been, at any point. But, Brad, I think, to Anne-Marie's point, here's the problem. Jake Tapper actually gave Donald Trump license. He said, I'm going to ask you this question. You can answer it however you want. I don't care if you actually address my point. So...
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what, if they decided at the outset or, before the debate, whether or not Bash and Tapper were going to call Trump on his nonsense. But I mean, even the outrageous statements around abortion, for example, that went uncalled and untested, other than, I think at one point Biden referred to Trump, and this is when Biden was sort of hitting his stride, if you will, called out the malarkey, as the 1940s called President Biden. Like, can you be a little more forceful on your bullshit calling? So, yeah, I mean, the whole it was a shit show. I mean, I don't know what more to say. I mean, it was fascinating to watch as a political watcher and observer and communicator. But boy, it was painful for anybody who does not want to see a second term for Donald Trump.
But thank God they didn't leave the mics live the whole time. Thank God Trump was on mute when Trump didn't have the floor, or it would have been a hell of a lot worse.
Although the golf debate got interesting there with crosstalk.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Well, even that Biden picked up on it and continued it.
Yeah.
I mean, what are you thinking? Sweet, merciful baby Jesus.
And Donald Trump,
closing statement.
And Donald Trump had to be the one to say, let's not act like children. What? Spock had a beard. We were in a parallel universe all of a sudden.
I just wonder, though, Bob, whether or not it was a good thing or not, because I think, again, it worked against Biden because... two things. It made Trump to the television audience look disciplined.
Yeah.
And who else could do that? Right?
The great irony. It was a great irony.
I think Biden was working very, very hard at controlling his stutter. So he must have been in a situation, you could say, there are several things that I understand he does to control his stutter. And that is, he lists things. Mm-hmm. That got annoying after a while. Number one, number two, but that is apparently to control his stutter. But his voice was so weak that you couldn't hear. If you look at the transcript, he does much better.
Yeah.
Biden does much better. But he also got caught up in trying to refute every lie. Well, you can't do that with. You just call the bullshit and then make your point. But was really trying to tell him that's not true, how it's not true, rather than talk about his own stuff. Anyway.
So in the meantime, like 3 days earlier, we had the by-election here in Toronto at Toronto St. Paul's. And if you listen to most of the analysis going in, I was a little surprised the morning after. Not that the Conservatives won, Bob. I was surprised that people were surprised that the Conservatives won.
Yeah, I mean, it's consistent with the polling that we've seen everywhere. I think it came down to symbolism, that seat had been so strongly Liberal for so long, and now here's a major brick in the empire's wall starting to fall out of place. I think the fact, I think the Liberals were prepared to take a drubbing, but not to actually lose the seat. And that the symbolic value of losing that seat has set in motion all the things that are happening now, and giving people, some anonymously, Wayne Long from New Brunswick, the lone elected Liberal who's saying we need to change at the top. I think all of them are getting fuel from that and getting emboldened from that to say, okay, we've been bad in the polls for 2 years now. The numbers are not turning around. It's not getting any better. And now this. So this is the proverbial straw on the camel's back.
Well, Lindsay, though, I mean, as Bob describes it, they expected to lose, but not this badly. To me, it's at the very heart of the issue here for the Liberals. They're out of touch with what most Canadians need or want. How many people do you know who look at the landscape right now, back to your original point, and say, where's my party?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of political orphans floating everywhere going, who am I in this space? Who am I going to vote for? And Dave, I think, again, like you introduced the question bang on at the beginning, and it's not dissimilar to like watching the tire fire that was the US debate. Is why do we all see the inevitable and no one else does? Like, why are we all seeing these things unfold and without much surprise? And yet, when the results happen, the Liberals lost. Yeah. Yes, they did. And they did because there's been no message. Leslie Church was, bless her, set up to fail. It was going to be near impossible for her to win that. She didn't have the backing of a successful party or any narrative of the future. There's nothing rooted in the Liberal Party right now that's aligned with something that makes sense to either what I'm living today, the economic realities of my day, the safety concerns of my day, et cetera, or where I want to go for myself or my family. So those are huge, huge problems for someone like, I'm a middle-aged downtown female. I am the Liberal Party demographically. And there's nothing that is speaking to me specifically. That's worrying. Now, is Polyev hitting it? No. Right. So that's also interesting. But the fact that the decision makers are so blind and in the closet about what's actually happening on the streets is, I don't know. They're gaslighting themselves. It's very worrying.
Well, Brad, I've heard this phrase this past week, and it applied to what was going on with the presidential election in the United States, and it was drive-by media. And, I've just pulled it up while Lindsay was talking, what the media looks like, coverage on the Toronto St. Paul's by-election. Every headline talks about the Liberal loss, as opposed to, holy cow, the Conservatives won. And it's a nuanced, subtle thing. But isn't the issue why the Conservatives won, not why it's just as important to talk about that. We seem to be missing that point. And say what you will about Poilievre. The fact is that This guy his candidate didn't have to answer any questions from the media. He refused to debate. He didn't go door to door. He still won. So what does that say about the people in Toronto, St. Paul's? And what does it say about our politics?
Well, I think it's the old saw, Dave, around, we unelect a government, we don't elect one. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. I personally don't quite understand the visceral hate that people have for Justin Trudeau, but it's there. It is clear. I see it on bumper stickers and I see it on flags all over the place. And so, I think the Liberals are going to need a change of leadership. But whether or not if that happens before the next election, can the Liberals still succeed? Probably not. I think they will. The country will unelect this government and elect a conservative government, whether it's a majority or a minority. And perhaps that's the time that the Liberal Party needs to then, reset and get a new leader to fight the next election. But I think I think people have just had it, and they'll do anything they can to see the backside of Justin Trudeau on his way out.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that Joe Biden looked tired. Anne-Marie and Canadians are just tired of, Justin Trudeau and his front bench for that matter. So it puts us in a really difficult place. I mean, the Americans are looking at, these are our choices. I mean, we're kind of asking the same question in this country.
I agree. I think, it's typical in Canada. We kind of, and I'm not your political expert, but every decade or so we decide we're going to unelect this government. Things are so bad and it has to be all of their fault, and I'm going to give this other guy a try. And that kind of is typical what happens. So I think that's the time. Whether or not Justin Trudeau goes down with the ship or somebody else does, it's hard to say. And it's same with Biden. They're never going to announce way far ahead that they're going to do something. They'll decide it in the moment. They can't leave a country rudderless. In the moment. That's a very dangerous thing to say, I am going to do this and I'm going to look for another person to run, kind of thing. So it's a very strategic thing, that the way they do it. But I guess what's really, again, I'll come back to sad that the politics that Poilievre espouses out there, that is stowing this hate against Trudeau and hate in general, is very demoralizing to me. That is that what people are going to choose instead, or is he just encourage us to hate, and then we'll look for either get away from politics and not vote at all, or just choose whoever.
I dare say it cuts both ways. I don't think the Prime Minister is a fan at all, even on a polite level, of Mr. Poilievre, and if they just don't like each other. So that's kind of creating its own ecosystem there all together as we watch it. Anne-Marie, you sent along this piece from the Star talking about people should be afraid, and how the conservative caucus and the MPs in Ottawa have taken issue with some of the expert advice that's come before some of the committees. And then what it turns into is effectively a grassroots social media campaign against some of these people who are doctors, et cetera. And we can take it to all the extremes you want. But here's one interesting thing to me, and I'll go back to that drive-by media. As much and all as I love our folks at the Toronto Star, they talked to everybody around this story, but they didn't get a comment, not even a no comment, from a conservative in Ottawa. So, we've got to be really careful in terms of how we wade into this environment, this political environment, because if they're not going to answer our questions, we need to say that. We asked them directly, well, why did you do this? Who was responsible for it? We didn't get an answer. That needs to be part of the story. It was not a part of that piece in the Toronto Star. Having said that, I think it's more than concerning that these folks in a variety of areas, mostly academics, are being targeted just because they disagree with the Conservatives, whether it was on, safe injection sites or, carbon pricing.
Yeah, I think in this particular, the one that kind of sparked that story as a doctor that has a pediatric practice, but she's also separate and apart is an advocate for safer drug supply. And what the Conservative Party put out there was that she feeds drugs to kids. So she reversed that and called for her license. It was, and they have not retracted it. And in fact, they doubled down on it. So the very personal attack related to their issues, because we all know how they feel about safer supply and safe consumption sites and so forth, that they used this poor woman who's now had to defend her license at her medical license. So really unfair kinds of things they do. And they have the Star found other examples, but you're right. They should have written a more balanced story. And if they couldn't get a comment from a Conservative, they should have very much said that. And usually they would say, we can't go, the Conservative Party wouldn't comment, or this MP wouldn't comment, that sort of thing.
Yeah, maybe. Bob, I just find more and more stuff is being written based on news release.
There's a lot of that. This was not that. And I'm going from memory here, which is never a wise bet for me. But I did think there was a reference in there that they did seek comment from on the strategy, and no one would respond to them. So, no surprise. And at the end of the day, the Conservatives are absent from the story one way or the other, because they're not going to wade into this. I find it concerning as well. We don't have a political history in this country of personally and professionally attacking critics of party positions. And I can't help but wonder, is it just more creep from south of the border in terms of some of the more extreme things that we've all been watching play out down there coming northward as well?
Yeah, Brad, I think that there's a certain capacity issue for media in general, and get away from this specific story, but when we start to look at the next obvious question to be asked sometimes gets avoided because, well, I got 3 other things I have to get done before deadline, or whatever it might be. This speaks as much to the state of our politics as it does to the state of our media.
Right. Well, I can, we could have a hot take. That's a shameless plug for my my Substack newsletter, and on this particular story, that so let's remember that's Bruce Arthur wrote that column, and Bruce is an opinion columnist who typically writes sports, but he dabbles frequently in politics and wrote frequently during the pandemic about the Ford government and was very critical of them. And I think this is part of the that Bruce is into, is this sort of pointing out and shaming, if you will, the anti-science crowd, which, we see some of. And so it's quite, if you want to talk about media and having, biases, I think, it's fair to say that there are columnists on both sides of the political spectrum who do that. Whether the media, and this is, as you say, I think this is a much bigger discussion we don't have time for here, and I could only, give you a quick hot take is, there's a lot of news release rewrites that are happening because they are so busy. But there's a lot of newsletters out there. There's a lot of opinion, and I think that's where the landscape is shifting. Paul Wells of the world, the Matt Gurneys of the world are all, not writing for mainstream media anymore. There's a lot of newsletters, sort of opinion pieces that are shaping sort of the chattering classes.
Yeah, I guess, Lindsay, would just to kind of follow that thread, and when you start to think everybody's got an opinion and everybody's got an asshole. So, I mean, let's just put that aside for a minute and look at the idea. The reason that Paul Wells and Matt Gurney and all the folks who are doing great work with their newsletters and Substack writing is because, I want to know what Brad thinks about that. So I'm going to read Brad's Substack. That's why I care what he thinks.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that very much.
No, I'm serious.
Yes.
Right? No,
Everyone should go read Brad Ross's
Hot takes.
Right. So, but
Let's go.
But there's a reputation there behind that, and Matt's the same. You know, I mean, you go down the line.
Yeah.
The reason that I'm subscribing to it and listening for it, it was like reading Christy Blatchford. Christy was a columnist, but the 5-star journalist that I was able to work with and around. She was a deep dive reporter who then used that fact finding to create and develop opinion and analysis. That's what we don't have.
Right. And all those people are driven by an immense amount of integrity, right? They've earned it. They're not right out of the gates. And we expect that there's going to be a degree of journalistic integrity research. We'll ask all parties. We'll ask, varying and opposing opinions. I see this story a purely political one. So yes, we know that all foundations of authority are being rocked right now, right? We saw that most profoundly during COVID, certainly. God bless all of the doctors who worked during that period and had to speak. But the drug use in BC are on our streets right now, or the encampments. They are beautiful visual stories. So if the Conservatives in this case can rally their social media and opinion machines, which is far stronger that we've seen anyway than their opponents, there's great political benefit in doing it. We just have to be able to read read the symbols. And that's where it becomes really difficult. So I'd like to see all of our, the Paul Wells, the Matt Gurneys, the Brad Rosses of the world here, be able to write about not necessarily double down on a singular opinion of some of these things. They're vastly complicated. And it's arrogant of any journalist to think that there is a single way to deal with opioid use. It's absolutely arrogant for a political party to land on that that same thing, right? The medical profession has been at this for decades. So there has to be an evolving conversation here. I hope that makes sense.
Well, but,
a whole bunch of thoughts.
And quite frankly, Bob, that's why I like this format in terms of media, because we can kind of take some of these ideas, germinate them, and let's have a larger, deeper conversation about it. But again, the story yesterday that came out that sort of flies in the face of that is the latest poll here in Ontario that asks Ontarians, how would you respond to an early election call? And it would appear that the premier might be in some jeopardy in various parts of the province if he were to call an early election. Back to our original question around the Liberals federally, is he listening to that?
Shades of David Peterson, 1990.
Right?
Yeah. Going with an early election to try and get ahead of a looming recession, and we got a Bob Rae NDP majority government out of it. So that lesson still resonates, and you can bet that they're parsing that polling data and comparing it with their own. Because make no mistake, the Conservatives are polling as well, and might even be testing that question as they consider pulling the plug early next spring. One thing that always remains true, if you're in a majority government position, you never call an election unless you're sure you can win it. So if this raises some doubt, that is going to be a factor that will be closely considered.
And again, I think, though, that the difference today, as opposed to 30 years ago, when you look at those situations, is everything we've talked about, to some degree, Bob, is politically related, because the Prime Minister, we're told, is waiting to see what happens south of the border so that he can stand up and say, I'm the only one who can protect Canada against a protectionist Trump administration. We're getting the word that Ford wants to go early because people will have such a bad reaction to Poilievre and his federal Conservatives. He doesn't want to have that hanging around his neck when he goes to the election in 2026. So all of this it seems to me, and I like to think I'm paying attention, it all seems to be tightly wound together, more so than we've seen in the past.
I'm shocked, Dave, shocked that there's politics at play in decisions that governments are making. Come on. Have we really fallen that far?
That's me pounding on the desk. Yeah, really.
It is the great domino game, though, right now. It seems like everyone's waiting for another domino. It's like, oh, I don't know who to support until that other domino falls. So I don't know who pulls that string from the tattered and knotted ball of yarn. Who will win? I'm not sure.
Well, on that, Amory, I mean, Bonnie Crombie's team's got their head must be spinning, because on the one hand, like a week ago, they were all screaming, "Oh, what are we going to do? We've just lost the safest Liberal seat in the country. How can we possibly break through?" But if this polling is correct, an early election would have her probably win Toronto. So, it just becomes such a crazy cycle.
I know it is something that I don't. I could never do this job, but it's the people that just sit and that's all they do is think about the strategy about winning, because that's in the end, that's all they care about is who's going to win. And sometimes they have to think way down the road too, who's going to win this election, because usually when it's a turnover election like this, from my understanding, is it's often, as Brad rightly said, it's you're unelecting the current administration and you go with let's try these new guys. And the standards are going to be really high for a new guy. And I think that the public, it's like they did with Bob Rae. Rae days, he was over. He was just over. And you knew he wasn't going to, they weren't going to be back again. They had this one term. They did a lot of stuff really, really fast. And then blew it on Rae Day. And you have to be older to know what that.
Well, you have to think that on election night, when Bob Rae's government was declared the government of the day, the resounding response in his office was, "Oh shit!"
Nobody was more panicked than Bob Rae.
Yeah.
Right. I before we go, this to me has not had as much attention as I think it needs, considering where we are with this project. And I want to draw on your experience and background, to the degree to which you guys are willing to, offer up insights, both Brad and Anne-Marie, because you both worked for so long in the public transit area. To me, I'm looking at the headlines around the Ontario line. Oh my God, it went from, being $11 billion to $28 billion or whatever in a year. And Phil Verster, I think he has rightly taken some criticism over the years in terms of things he has said or hasn't said or whatever it might be. I think his explanation was a little misunderstood when he said what we put out in front of you, or what the government put out in front of you, was not the entire cost. And things get complicated, Anne-Marie, because now we look at the whole project and we're looking at a 30 or a 50-year timeline. It includes operating it. It includes maintaining the line. We never used to have that language in it, say, 15 years ago. This is a relatively new part of the budget line. So it's easy to say it went from this, it explodes to that. But that's what it's going to cost to maintain and operate the Ontario line, one. And the company that's doing it is committing to it now. It's not saying, over the next 30 years, we'll see how it works and it's likely to go higher. They have to make the commitment going in. Unless I have misunderstood that, I don't know where the story is here.
Well, I think there are a couple of ways. One is that the journalists that looked at the numbers, like Ben Spurs, has been doing transit for a really long time. So he was there when the Ford government made the announcement of these big transit projects pre-pandemic. So these are always nuanced numbers. One is they include no operating dollars. It's just the capital dollars. And they put in little brackets that people don't get the year. So the estimate was created. For example, if they made the announcement, I believe in 2018, and they announced a bunch of projects. So buckle up. You're going to start hearing about all the other projects and their costs escalating as well. They put in brackets the dollar figure in the year. So it would have been probably 2015 because that's when the estimates were actually drawn up. So, and we all know that 2015 to 2024, things have changed financially for us all. So the economic landscape has changed. So of course the capital costs have gone up. And then you add in the operating dollars. So Ben knows these budgets. And so he goes into the reports and then he adds them all together. And I think it's, and is that fair without explaining? And perhaps he explained it way down in the story. But it's also a failing of the government. When you make these announcements, you set yourself up for failure. You just set yourself up by, they want to be able to announce the smallest number they can. And so they do. And then down the years, years down the road, you're going to get bit in the ass for it because then the operating dollars are known and the capital costs are, of course, higher. Nobody estimated, nobody knew in 2018, of course, that we were going to have a global pandemic that really would screw with your finances. But it has no doubt gone up, the capital costs, even if you strip out the operating.
Right. So, but I mean, wouldn't it have made your life simpler doing comms for the TTC, Brad, if you were able to actually sell that operating and maintenance number as a good news story? I mean, it should be, shouldn't it?
Well, yeah, in a perfect world. The problem, Dave, is that I don't care what it is. The minute you put a number out there with a dollar figure attached to it, you might as well tattoo it to your forehead because you will forever and a day be explaining that number and why it has increased. So you have to caveat every single number, and you have to keep coming back to it and coming back to it and coming back to it so that when you announce, in 10 years hence, because of operating costs or maintenance costs or capital costs have gone up, everything is going up. Everything's gone up since the war, Sonny, that the costs are going to increase, right? And they probably put some money in there for severance packages for certain individuals as well, I can imagine. Contracts are written to be fought. And that's, you'll see what's happening right now with the Crosstown, right? And that the Crosslinks, the consortium that is building this thing, them and Metrolinx are in court or their lawyers are fighting across tables every single day. There are contracts in place, but there are going to be unexpected things are going to happen, as they always do. And that's why you have contingencies and the like, but it's never going to be enough. So all that to say, be ready. These numbers are going to continue to change.
Well, Bob, though, the whole question that we're talking about here and that what they try to get at is mitigating or see who owns the risk here. And that's really what each party is paying for, whether it's the government or the consortium involved in these big projects. I don't quite understand why, again, I go back to the comm strategy around this, why the agencies or the government, and I'm still not clear on the relationship between IO and Metrolinx, to be honest with you, but still, where their clarity is on here's what we're doing, and to Brad's point, saying here's the framework that we work within, and here are the contingencies that are even built into it, and we know that it's going to cost this much to maintain these trains over the next 50 years. Here's what the last 50 years of maintenance look like. Look at how much money we're saving. There's a way of framing this so that the average consumer or commuter can understand, even if it does go up over the next 10 years, that this is why and this is how.
The devil's in the details, where it always is, and so is the politics. Because there's no way Doug Ford could have sold to his electorate writ large a $27 billion subway plan for the city of Toronto. There's no way. When it's $10 billion, just the construction cost, let's take all that operating and maintenance and everything out of the equation, then it becomes more palatable, especially if you're throwing an equal number at Ottawa for an LRT network there, or you're spreading things around the province. So it was pure politics that made them go with the smallest possible number at the outset, because once the shovels are in the ground and it's too late to turn things back, well, then you can take the hit on, well, of course, it's higher because that initial announcement didn't include operating and maintenance and all those other things that are essential components of it. So it's politics, and despite our friend Ben Spur's efforts, it is also journalism that, that needs to be part of the reporting mix as well, and made clear by these beat reporters who really know this stuff inside out and backwards, to present it to the public, to say, but wait,
there's more. Sticker shock.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Just to be clear, when you said, the shovels are in the ground and it's too late to turn it back, just to remind everybody, Bob worked for a guy who filled the hole back in. So
it was early going in those tunnels, very early, and a crippling provincial.
He's still got the story straight.
On message.
Message. But reputationally, again, for the city, it just so happens that was it one of the guys from what was the boy band? He was in town and he got so stuck in traffic he had to walk to his gig, and he was talking about congestion. But this is the kind of thing that kind of lends itself into this story. Either we invest in the transit, or we just say buy an e-bike and move on.
Yeah, I mean, and apparently this happened to Slash as well, which I didn't know about, but makes me endlessly happy that Slash is in a cab somewhere trying to get to his concert. That's just a great visual for me. But yeah, no, like the theme of this podcast seems to be no shit Sherlock, right? That transit is going to take longer and is going to cost more money. It all comes down to no one on the man on the street, the person on the street wants something built, and they want it built on time, right? So I don't know what $15 billion means. I don't know what $20 billion means. It's a whole lot more than anyone has, right? Get the thing built. And that's where we need more transparency. I'd love Ben Spur to be writing and pushing those buttons, like whether it is the 10 billion, whether it's the 15 billion, I feel like rightly or wrongly, everyone gets it. It's going to cost more. This is all a ruse to get stuff built. We need stuff built. No shit, Sherlock.
Yeah, well, I think you're probably right. Let's just go quickly around the horn. Anne-Marie, what's on tap in your world that you're looking forward to this week?
Oh boy, this week. Well, still catching up after I had a very nice long weekend. Well, most of it was very nice. I have stories to tell from it, but not for today. But it was a really nice.
Anne-Marie, give us a hint.
And it's related to the Gardner.
Is it Pride related? Were you dancing?
I was going to say we need to get a paywall now, and yes. We have the bonus after show conversation.
50 Shades of Anne-Marie's gray hair.
It's related to the congestion too.
Oh, I heard you reference that this morning on the radio.
Yeah, it's a complicated story. So, anyways, and then the only person that got attention was, of course, the pop star got the attention for walking.
There you go.
I would have been stuck around the same time he was. So, anyways, so I probably am going to have just some visits with my youngest granddaughter this week. So I'm looking forward.
How old is she?
She's just 1.
Oh, yeah.
So she's perfect. Cheeky already,
Absolutely.
so she got a real cheeky personality. So
that's well. Wonder where she gets that.
Yeah.
Bob, how about you?
I'm enjoying the weather because by and large it's been really good. It hasn't been cripplingly hot. It's been fairly pleasant. And Dave, you'll relate to this. Next week, my band is doing the first of 3 outdoor summer dates. So I'm hoping for the weather to continue to be nice for that.
Nice, yeah. Where are you playing? I saw the post.
East Gwillimbury's Music Nights series kicks off next Tuesday night in the town of Sharon, and our act, the Tailor Made Band, we're the first headliner for that. So looking very, very much forward to that.
Cool.
And I would suggest going to that site and checking out some of the recorded music that they have from their gigs. That's fucking good.
Thank you, sir. That's
it's really
tmband.ca.
Lindsay, how about you?
I'm going to see a Toronto FC game tonight. It's fun, actually, a bunch of women in business and comms. So we'll see how that goes. Soccer, beer, and smart folks.
And good weather.
So it should be fun.
Good.
Yeah, hopefully.
Brad, how about you?
Proud father alert. My daughter, Chelsea, who is 29, is starting a 1-year residency in clinical psych at a hospital in Halifax. So we are doing a road trip starting Monday, attaching a little trailer to the back of my truck, and we're doing a road trip. Going to settle her into her apartment, come back, and she's going to drive herself back down at the end of August.
How long are you staying in Halifax?
So we're there a week. We leave Monday, and 2 days to get there, a couple of days there to settle in. Probably make a trip to IKEA. I assume they have an IKEA in Halifax.
They do.
And then back 2 days back. So nice. it'll be fun.
Actually, I think the IKEA is on the Dartmouth side.
Is it? All right. Well, we'll find it.
Yeah. Set the ways up and away you go. The brain trust, the real brain trust for Story Studio Network actually lives in Eastern Passage in Halifax.
Well, we'll talk offline then, because Chelsea needs to meet some new people.
Indeed. For me, we had a delayed gathering for Father's Day was this past weekend in June, and my son is a father of two, and the youngest there, Anne-Marie, he's only 9 months, but it's just starting to pull himself up and do all the things to get him into trouble stuff. So he said, it was delayed, but I got a Father's Day gift for you. I said, oh, you don't have to do that. He said, no. Are you available to go to see Herbie Hancock at Massey Hall in October? Oh, nice. And I said, yep, calendar looks good. And it just so happened that I got tickets for Bruce Springsteen in November, and I had intended to invite him. So we're doing Herbie Hancock and Bruce Springsteen in the fall.
Very nice.
Not doing the Taylor Swift thing, but looking forward to that. Listen, folks, have a great weekend, and it's the first full weekend of July. So we'll do this probably through every couple of weeks until the end of July, and then we'll let you put tools down in August, and we'll get all ramped up and get back at it in September. So Anne-Marie, Lindsay, Bob, Brad, thank you all. This has been fun.
Take care, everybody.
Bye, all.
Awesome. Take care.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Now and next is Story Studio Network's flagship podcast, produced by our chief executive producer, Dave Trafford, and supported by our entire SSN team, including our senior producers, Becky Coles and Jen Hudson, our technical producer and audio editor, Mike Trutler. Jamie Nickerson is our production manager, and our sonic logo designer is Greg McDonald. Also, I'm Erin Trafford, Queen of the Universe.
And that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, everybody, that's a wrap.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.